up there, huh? I love this stuff. There's a bunch of chickens. They enjoy it when it's down. We had quite a bit of bedding in here, but it works its way down and gets thinner and warmer in here. We want to keep the bedding nice and deep. All right, triple bug mix, guys. I got gloves on. I don't want to touch this. Ew. Freeze-dried bugs for you. Really stink. There you go. First one in, dig in.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our channel. Today is root cellar stocking day. We are going to be putting away the lamb stew and the lamb that I talked about in the last video. This stuff has been sitting on my counter for a few weeks now, and I finally got everything cleaned off, ready to go into the cellar, and Dan had to snowplow me a really big path to get out there to the root cellar. So we're going to go over there and see how things are progressing in the root cellar, how the squash and the cabbage are doing, and put some of these things away. And I need to get some more small jars for my canning project for today. It is supposed to start freezing rain in about an hour or so. So I want to get all of this stuff down there now because I don't want to be walking around out in the freezing rain. And then I'm inside for the rest of the day. So it's a perfect day to be doing some winter canning. So I'll see you in the root cellar.
Welcome to my root cellar. I've got one whole set of shelves right here for all my empty jars. I got a little bit of extra on there because I ran out of room when I filled it up last fall. And then I've got all the shelves all the way around. And this is the coleslaw that I did before. This is what we're going to be doing today. But I used green and purple cabbage, and it turned the whole jar purple, and the coleslaw turns out purple when you add the mayonnaise to it. So I'm not going to do the purple again. It tastes fine. It just cosmetically looks a little weird. All right, so I've got Dan's pickled eggs up on the top, and then I've got jams, jellies, relishes, all sorts of pickled jalapenos, peppers, and that's what's left of my maple syrup from last year. Definitely need to stock up again this year on that. And then I've got all my more jalapenos and fruits, applesauces, peaches, that kind of thing. Obviously, my lights are motion activated. I got a lot of pantry supplies that are down here that just don't fit in the house. So I've got extra vinegars and some tuna and stuff. And then all of my, like my green salsas and beans, tomato products right there. And then I've got my seed potatoes for this year. They look terrible, but they're actually perfect for planting. These have actually been down here since the fall of 24. I planted a bunch of them last year, and my brother had given me these, and I thought, well, if I don't plant them, we'll see how long they last, and I think they'll still grow something. And then on this side is where I keep all of my meat. So all the meat right here is the lamb, and you can tell it's the lamb because there's a lot of fat in it. I don't have any kind of fat like that in my venison or my elk. And then I've got all my pre-made meals. I've got a lot of lamb stew and chicken stuff. All of my pre-made sauces. I've got some tomato soup and spaghetti sauce, canned potatoes, more stew, more tomato products, and then some chicken down there. And then I've got chicken over here, various sizes, and then elk and venison. And then all of my bone broths down there, and then all of my freeze-dried different things out of my garden. And I've got a bunch of that over here as well. All of these are just different, all the eggs and herbs and all that kind of stuff. And then over here under the stairs, we do run a dehumidifier in here in the summertime. Sometimes we have to run the generator in order to run it, but sometimes we need to get it dried out here a little bit in the summer. And then I've got some extra buckets of some dried goods, rice, sugar, oatmeal, that kind of stuff. And I can hear the smoke alarm upstairs in our guest house. We got to change battery on that. And then I do have some freeze-dried single meals for camping and stuff, breakfast skillets, some soups and that kind of stuff. And now we did actually do the proper ventilation. Our cold intake is low. And then on this side, by the light, we've got the out. And we need to, I think, put one of those little twirly things up on top of that one to kind of actually pull the air out of here. But it's not frozen down here. Everything is really good. So let's go make some coleslaw.
All right, so I had to take a couple of the layers off of the outside of the cabbage, but for the most part, they're good and solid. They smell really good. They smell like cabbage. They're not fermented in any way. They're kind of cold, so it's like they've been in the fridge. But once I got rid of the outer layers, they're pretty good. There's a couple little spots on here I'm going to cut off. But first thing we're going to do is cut up our cabbage for the coleslaw. Now, Dan and I love this coleslaw. It is in perfectly sized portion jars for us. We could never go through a bag of coleslaw mix. We'd be eating it for days, and it's just too much. So this is just the perfect size for us. And it's really, really good. And it's the safe way to can cabbage because it's got a lot of vinegar in the dressing. So I am going to get these cut up. I'm going to take a couple more layers off here. So for the recipe that we're going to do, we want 4 pounds of shredded cabbage. And it also calls for bell peppers and onions in the recipe, but all I do is the cabbage and the carrots. So we need 4 pounds of cabbage and then 3 cups of the rest of the veggies. Get this thing cut up. And when you're cutting up cabbage for coleslaw, you want a really nice fine dice. Get that core out of there yet. There's a little bit left. The bigger cabbages definitely did better than the smaller ones. Grab a bag for the chickens. Bring that up here when they'll enjoy that. All right. I'm going to cut these up and then get them rinsed. Still smells like good cabbage. I'm disappointed that my squash didn't do very well. And these really big spines, you can cut those out too. Those just never seem to dice up really well. All right. I'm going to cut this guy in half. You can cut it however you like it. I like it really fine. I don't do a lot of canning this time of year, but I had to break into the shipping container to go get all my big bowls. So this kind of dice is the way I like it. And then if you got any of those, break it up and get all those really big ribs in there, you can pop those out. And then we're going to do grated carrots. If you got a mandolin, this would be a lot faster. And I think 4 pounds of cabbage, when I did this last fall, was 2 of the bigger cabbages. So I've got 2 bigger ones, 2 smaller ones. So I might end up doing a batch and a half. We'll see how much all this weighs, but I'm going to do all of it. All right, I am going to keep cutting. I'm going to dice all of this up, and then I'm going to grate some carrots. You can do this with store-bought cabbages as well when cabbages are on sale. I don't know when, St. Patty's Day, I think, is in March, isn't it? I think. They probably go on sale about that time. You can get them pretty cheap. So you can grab a bunch of cabbages, and so if you don't have room for a garden, or you just don't like growing cabbages because they take up a lot of room, grab yourself some extra cabbages at St. Patty's Day and can up some coleslaw. And then once we got these done, I'll tell you how I prepare them, because this is some of the best coleslaw ever. I was pretty worried about these. These were awful squishy on the outside, but I could tell they were solid on the inside, but I'm really glad that I'm able to salvage these. I don't like food going to waste. Okay, I got 4 cabbages cut up. I'm going to weigh them here a minute. About 5.5 pounds, and my bowl is about 8 ounces. So we're looking at 5 pounds for that bowl. And we're looking at about 9 pounds there. And the only reason that I'm weighing these is just so I get the right amount of salt on them. So this is 2 batches. And I also want to make sure that for every batch that I want to have enough brine. So that's really the only reason that I'm actually care about weighing them. It's a pretty easy recipe. I did have to go buy a new bag of carrots. I was about out of carrots. So I'm going to get these cut up, get them shredded, and then we will take the next couple steps from there. Okay, I've got 4 pounds of cabbage in each bowl and about 3 cups of shredded carrots. I'm going to get my salt. You're going to want to use a canning salt or like a Redmond salt or anything that's not iodized. And the reason that you don't use iodized salt in canning is because it discolors your canning. So we want, I'm just a hair over 4 pounds on these, so I'm going to go with just a little bit more than a tablespoon of salt. Maybe a good heaping tablespoon here, and just sprinkle over top our vegetables. And the goal here is to draw out some of the moisture. And I think they come up with an easier bag than these. All right, it's a little more than a tablespoon for each one. All right, and this is where clean hands come in handy, and I don't have a bigger bowl. I do have a bigger bowl, but it's got a slight little pinhole in the bottom, and then it leaks, so you just got to kind of mix it up without making a mess. Just spread that salt around, and then these are going to sit for about an hour while it draws the water out of the cabbage and the carrots. And even though these sat in the root cellar for a long time, they're still really moist. So, and they're still crunchy. So get this mixed up as best you can. And then while these are sitting for about an hour, we're going to go ahead and get our jars washed and sterilized. And these are in vinegar, so we're going to water bath can it. You don't need a pressure canner. And then when it comes time to get... That was a giant thing of snow coming off the roof. It just shook the whole house. Wow, that was loud. Forgot where I was at. Oh, we're going to put pickle crisp in the jars when we can this. And that's going to keep this cabbage nice and crispy, so it actually tastes like a crispy coleslaw. And we love this stuff. Dan said it's the best coleslaw he's ever had. All right. So it is about 10 after 1. We're going to let these sit. I'm going to get my jars washed, and I will be back with you in about an hour. Okay, our jars are ready to go. It's been an hour, and I've got our brine ready to go here also. So we're going to get that started on the stove so that can heat up while we are packing our jars. So this is a pickle brine, and we are going to need, for each batch, 5.5 cups of white vinegar. So we need 11 cups of vinegar. And this is 8 cups. I use organic vinegar. I only found out recently that vinegar was made with corn. I didn't know that. And so it's highly genetically modified. All right, so there's 8 cups. And then we need another 3. And you might have just a little bit extra. And you can just put it in the fridge and use it for the next batch if you have any extra. All right, so there's that. And we need 3 cups of water. It's actually 1.5 cups of water, but we're doubling the batch, so I need 3. There's that. And 2 tablespoons of celery seed and mustard seed. Now, you could use a regular pickle mix if you want. This is just what this recipe calls for. You can pretty much do whatever you want with it. I've got the celery seed and the mustard seed. I'll just use these. Actually, I need 2 tablespoons for each batch, so I need 4 tablespoons. If you don't like celery seed, use something else. Like I said, I only did 2 of this. I need 4. All right, and then we just need the sugar. Now this calls for 4 cups of sugar per batch. This is an insane amount of sugar, I know that. So we have 8 cups of sugar, but remember, this is the brine that we're canning it in, and you're not going to be drinking the brine. The recipe actually calls for you to drain off the brine when you're going to serve it and rinse it if you want. I don't rinse it. I'll tell you how I make it here when we're stuffing our jars here, but we're going to put 8 cups of sugar in there. Your wooden spoon. You want a nice big pot for this. And then we're just going to heat this up until it's hot and the sugar is melted. So I'm going to put this on the stove, and then let's fill our jars. And it's going to smell really good in here shortly. All right. Move some of these over here a little bit. I've got 16 jars here. You can use regular mouth jars or wide mouth jars. I use the wide mouth jars for these because you're stuffing cabbage in there, and it's gonna be hard to stuff it in a regular mouth. And I can tell that this is really softened up a lot with the salt. And you can always tell there's a little bit of water on the bottom. Now you're just going to take these jars, keep it over top of your bowl, and just stuff down in there really hard. You're going to get more in there than what you think you are. But remember, you're going to fill up all that empty space with brine. Just push it down until you got 1/2 inch headspace. I just put it down and just push. There, nice and tight. And if you wanted to put some colored peppers in there to make it look pretty, that would be good too. I don't prefer the peppers. I like the cabbage and the carrots. Now when I make this, I drain off the vinegar mixture, the brine, and I don't rinse it, because a good coleslaw dressing has a touch of vinegar in it anyway. And so I will take my jar, empty off the brine, pour the coleslaw in a bowl, and it's got just enough vinegar on it that when you add mayonnaise to your bowl, it's going to make a really good coleslaw dressing. And then you can add a little bit of whatever else you want to add to it. If you wanted to add a couple little spices, or it doesn't need any more salt. You could add an apple. I like apples in my coleslaw. Dan doesn't, so I don't always do that. This is really good without adding anything else too. Just dump off your brine, mix some mayonnaise in there, and you're good to go. Important part is that you push it down enough that you get all those, as much air out of there as you can. Now the recipe for 4 pounds says it takes 8 pints. So I've got 16. We'll see if I got enough. I might have to wash a couple more jars. I know I'm a little over 4 pounds. I didn't mix this very well. All my carrots are on the top. I want a good mixture of carrots. But I got some room now to move it around. I really think I like my winter canning almost more than I do my summer canning, because when I'm canning out of the garden, you're on a time crunch. You got to get that stuff harvested before it goes bad. My winter canning is just pre-made meals like this kind of stuff that I can just, hey, I got time today. What can I can to fill up the root cellar with? So it's a little more relaxing. You know, I've got chicken carcasses in the freezer that I got to make some chicken broth with, and it's like, they're frozen. I'll get to them when I have the time. I got some carrot on the rim, but we're going to wipe these rims really well. So we're just going to keep filling all of these jars. And our brine is heating up. And then once we have these jars full, we're going to add some pickle crisp to the top. I think it's 1/8 of a teaspoon per jar. And then we'll pour the brine over top, and then we will can these for 20 minutes in a boiling water canner. And even though you're canning it, this cabbage stays crisp. I did a big batch of this with my daughter-in-law last time they were up here visiting, when we did coleslaw, and we did bone broth, and we did some jalapeno jelly. I had some jalapenos in the freezer that needed to be used up too. Sent her home with a whole bunch of canned goods. That was a fun weekend. Alrighty. So I'm going to just keep filling these jars. I'm going to go get a few more, I think, because I think I'm going to need them. And get those washed up. And then I will meet you back here when all of these jars are full, and we'll go from there. It's definitely kind of a messy job. We ended up filling all 16 of our jars, and I got just a little bit left, not even enough to fill a jar. It's just enough that I can throw some of the brine on it and let it sit, and then we can eat that for supper. So now we are not going to wipe our rims until we're done adding everything. Otherwise, we're just going to end up wiping our rims again. So we're going to want some pickle crisp. Pickle crisp is just calcium chloride, and this is going to help it stay crunchy. And you can use this when you can pickles or relishes if you want them to have a little bit of a crunch to them yet. Now there is some of the cabbage is a little bit soft where there was a little bit more salt, but this is going to crisp it right back up. So we want 1/8 of a teaspoon for each jar. We're going to put that right on top so that our brine can even it out when we put the brine in there. And we've got more than enough salt in there, so we are not adding any salt. And our sugar's all dissolved in that. I'm just letting it get a little bit hotter. And we really stuffed these jars. But when the hot brine hits it, it's going to shrink up this cabbage just a little bit. And then when we can it, it's going to shrink it up a little bit more. So we really wanted to get these as full as possible. All right, pickle crisp in. And you can find this in any store by the canning goods. You can find it pretty much anywhere that canning jars are sold, whenever they're selling the pickle seasonings and all that kind of stuff. You can find that there. It's called Pickle Crisp, and this is Ball brand Pickle Crisp. Now, when you have a brine like this with like a pickle spice in there, all of your spices are going to float to the top. So you want to make sure you stir it before you add. And I need a thing out. All right. This is hot, so don't spill it on yourself. And you're going to have to pour slowly because you're going to have to let that brine kind of float down through the cabbage. And you want a 1/2 inch headspace. So what we're going to do is fill up all of our jars, and then we're going to debubble them, and then we'll go back and add more as needed. I'll probably end up having a little bit of extra brine, and I'll just put that in a canning jar in the fridge. It's just mostly vinegar and sugar, so it's going to last a really long time. And then when I get the other ones out of the root cellar, maybe next week, then I can use it up, and then I don't have to make quite as much brine the next batch. Ooh, that one went over. That's hot. Now, before you eat this, you're going to want to let them sit for several weeks to actually pickle up. You could eat them right away. I'm going to eat this little bit of leftovers tonight, but you're going to get a better coleslaw if you wait a few weeks and let it sit in that vinegar for a while. All right. That's everybody. So now we're going to take our butter knife, and we're going to just kind of push it in along the sides here, and you're going to see that some of your air bubbles are going to pop back up. And it's going to give you just a little bit more room, and then you can push the rest of your coleslaw down too. It floats up a little bit when you add the liquid at first. I like to go in on all 4 sides, kind of pull it to the middle there a little bit, and then push it back down. 1/2 inch headspace is what you want. I know mine look really full, but maybe empty just a few of these out a little bit. All right, get all the air bubbles out of all of these. My hands are super sticky because there's a lot of sugar in this brine. And you could probably cut back on the sugar. Lucy's knocking stuff off my desk over there. Right. We're going to make sure that that one is good. That one's good. Now that I got all the air bubbles out of it, I felt they were a little over full, but once you get your air bubbles out and everything settles right back down again, I'm going to take a little bit out of that one. That one's a little bit too full. And I just put it in some of them that don't have as much. 1/2 inch headspace isn't that much, so I guess that one didn't really need it either. You just want to make sure that you push everything down. You want to make sure that all of the cabbage and all of the vegetables are covered with liquid, that they can all sit underneath that liquid. I don't want to pour that back into here if I'm going to save that for later, now that it's been in the cabbage. All right, this is why we are going to wipe our jars off before we can them. I like this even better that it's a water bath canning recipe. I don't have to get my pressure canner out. Not that it isn't out anyway. Sitting on my porch waiting to do bone broth. But water bath canning's quicker. Just a little bit too much in this one. Once the liquid's in there too, you can smash it down a little bit easier. Okay, 16 jars. Everybody's got brine. Everybody's been debubbled. When I push them down, all of the cabbage is below the level of the liquid. Now's the time to be evening out everybody. All right. So for wiping your rims, I like to use vinegar, especially if I've got sugar in here. I just put a little bit of vinegar on a paper towel. Pick up your jar and just wipe all the way around. Make sure that your rims are nice and clean. All that sugar residue, the pickle crisp, the salt, all of that is off of your rim. And this is a really good time to feel the tops of your jars to make sure that you don't have any cracks or dings in the top of your jars. The first year I made this, I only made 12 jars. Dan liked it so much that he ate a couple of them right away. Then we realized we didn't have that many left, and we had to ration them for the rest of the year. You get one a month from here on out, and that's it until I make more next year. So we said from then on, make sure you have plenty of canned coleslaw. All right, everybody's wiped down. All right, let's put your lids on. And then hand tight on with your rings. Isn't that beautiful? If I counted right. Yep, everybody's got a lid. All right, let's get the canner in here. Now, this is a canning pot and a stock pot. And I've got my basket in here. I'm gonna put these in here. I like to add my water later, just so it's not so heavy to move it. This is actually my smaller one, so I'm going to end up doing 2 batches. Yep, I'm going to get 8 pints in there. Put that down in there. Let's fill this thing up. Now I've got really hard water, so I'm going to put some vinegar in my water just to keep my jars clean. Otherwise they get that hazy film on it, and it's hard to wash them off after a while. We're going to cover these up at least an inch over the top of the jars. Bring it to a boil. Let them boil for 20 minutes. Let them rest for 5-10 minutes before we take them out, and then we'll do the next batch. And then we will be back with you then. See how they turned out. All right, these have been boiling for 20 minutes and resting for a few minutes. I went ahead and just got my other pot out. All right, 16 jars. None of them broke. Now we wait and listen for the pings. That means the sound of success. So these are going to stay on the counter at least until tomorrow, and then I'll mark them with the year. And I know what they are, so I don't need to mark what they are. And that's it. Hey, buddy. So let me show you how I make this. Just grab a small bowl here. So if we were taking a jar, we would pour off all the liquid. I'm just going to scoop it out since it's in a cup here. And you can eat it straight like this. Then it's more of a vinegary coleslaw. I like more of a sweeter coleslaw, but I actually like a combination of the two. So now all our brine is over there. I'm going to take just a little bit of mayonnaise. Mix that in just until, and there's a little bit of vinegar on the bottom, so that's going to mix with the mayonnaise and give you a perfect coleslaw dressing, along with the little bit of the sweet sugar. And it thins right out, the mayonnaise does, because of the vinegar. You could strain it. You could rinse it if you don't want the vinegary taste. Perfect. And then you can add whatever you want to it. Like I said, when I have apples, I actually like a little bit of apple in my coleslaw. But this is really good. Now, I would wait at least 3 to 4 weeks and let this pickle really good before you actually try and eat it. I mean, this is good, but letting it wait a little bit longer would be even better. So that's all we have for today. I've got 16 more jars now to put into my root cellar. And if you like coleslaw and you have a lot of cabbage or cabbages on sale, try this recipe because it's really easy. I'll put the recipe in the description below so you can follow it. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye.